Good morning. What a beautiful surprise to see you yet again. I'm so happy that you decided to join us, and I'm already feeling my heart just opening in that special way of knowing how connected we are, no matter how sparse the sanctuary may seem, that still, no matter where you are, no matter what time you are listening to the words of this Sunday message, we are unified. We are absolutely unified, and I can just feel that moving through me. So I begin this morning by blessing this sacred space, this space in the cosmos that has called us together to be alive on the planet at this time and to be sitting in consciousness, in that preparedness of receiving some new information or an age-old message of spiritual principle that will be heard with fresh ears. And so I know this time, this place is blessed, and I just release it and allow it to move into expression through me as a part of the way that law of mind works. So thank you so much for joining today. I have such an exciting message plan to share with you. I've been speaking at a very high level of my own sort of edge of growth, and the way that I'm interpreting what's going on in the world, and the way that I feel so competently able to share that with you in brand new expressions. And so today will be exactly that, a continuation of this great forever conversation. I'm speaking about the ever ascending cycles, which is a term that my favorite metaphysician, Dr. Ernest Holmes, used quite often. And it really pertains to this idea of the circle of life. That there is a way that all of life, if we examine nature, we can see it if we are willing to even look at the cumulative experiences of our own lives in personal ways, we can begin to understand that there's something cyclic about life, and that every time the cycle goes around, we have a little more information, and so we're looking at life from a different view. And I want us to really think about that, because I believe the message that I've prepared for you this morning speaks to it in such a practical way that this is information that all of us can use. So let's just look at this idea of the ever ascending cycles in the way that we see there's sort of an upwardness. Holmes would call it upward spirals in ever expanding circles. And Holmes is not unique. You know, there were great thinkers long before the metaphysicians of the 18th and 19th centuries. There have always been mystics or people that are spiritually intuitive, that not only perceive that idea of the cyclic nature of life, but are able to put it to words or to music or poetry. And so we can look at the spiritual traditions throughout the history of humankind, and we can see that there's a reiteration of this very idea that there is this great cycle of life. There is a way we can understand it in a sort of universal way, in which we see that circular fashion and the way that life takes us. Sometimes it feels like you're back to the beginning, or in spiritual metaphors we say peeling the layers of the onion. You know, there are all kinds of ways we reference it. But what we're saying is that we just have this opportunity to see that we are always ascending to higher levels of the way that we experience our life. I think that if we go beyond the walls of just religious tradition, what we can see is people in more current time, like Joseph Campbell, who wrote so eloquently about the hero's journey. There's that image of the circle, actually, as I see myself on it, maybe I should be doing it this way. It looks backwards. There's this idea of this circle of life, and that the hero's journey always starts right where the hero is at, and then something causes us to leave home. And what we know is that it's growth. It's that natural inclination to have new experiences or to grow and expand our knowledge. And so we leave the safety of the home front and we start on this great journey. And in that journey, we're separated from everything familiar, and we have to slay dragons and face our demons and find out how strong we really are. We actually face that idea of life and death. But that ultimately we return home. And then at some point we recognize that the journey begins again. So it's an ongoing, forever and ever process, this idea that we call the hero's journey. It's a great spiritual story, isn't it? One of my favorite poetic quotes I have carried through most of my adult life comes from T.S. Eliot. And I paraphrase when I say I love the meaning of his words when he said, we return to the place we once began, but somehow we know it for the first time. And wow, that speaks volumes for me. I recognize that in those personal encounters of returning home again in my own life, and I'm certain that you do too. So I did a kooky thing, and I did a search on the term, the circle of life. And the definition that most pleased me came from Collins Dictionary, the online dictionary. And it said that the circle of life is the infinite nature of energy. I love that, because when we're talking about science and spirit at the same time, we understand that we can recognize God is that infinite energy, that force in the universe. So the circle of life is the infinite nature of the energy. Something dies and then it gives new life to something else, symbolizing the universal sacred or the divine. There's a gorgeous statement. Here is a way we can take this universal thing and apply it to our own lives. Now I'm going to read to you the quote that got my attention, and one that I use a lot in my own life, that comes from the Science of Mind textbook. So it's a term that, it's actually a quotation from Dr. Ernest Holmes. And I found it on page, I think it was 336 in the textbook. But listen to these luscious words of Dr. Holmes, speaking on the same topic. Our individualized universe is forever complete, yet it is forever completing itself. In order that every experience may teach us to transcend some previous experience in these ever ascending cycles upward bound. And so I have used this quote so often in my own life. This has remained a favorite quotation, a guiding quotation of mine. I think it even is part of one of the attractions that allowed me to find this teaching as sort of my home base. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about the life of Ernest Holmes as the founder of religious science, or this teaching, the science of mind, because he has an interesting life. He was born in 1887 in a little farmhouse in Lincoln, Maine, and it was sort of a remote area. They were actually about 3 miles from the city, Lincoln, and the family lived in sort of a pioneer setting in a log cabin, and Ernest was the 9th son of William and Anna Holmes. So first of all, I can't imagine having 9 boys and living in something that's not much more than a one-room cabin. Although my grandma Skelly, my dad's mom, had 9 kids, and the first 8 were boys. But fortunately, Aunt Wanda came along as baby number 9 and saved the day. So I know it happens. It's actually in my life, which also means, my mom and dad both were one of 9 kids, so I have a cajillion cousins all over the place. And what I can tell you about Ernest Holmes being the last child in such a big family was that he was blessed by an interesting upbringing. His parents, Anna and William, were very open-minded, and in that day and in that location, it was very common that everybody went to church on Sunday, and they did. They would put the horse and the buggy together, and they would go to town, and whatever preacher was there that week or for that spell of time would deliver a message that suited that particular preacher. And then mom and dad would take the boys home and tell them what they thought about what the preacher said. And so mom and dad were really open-minded. They actually studied, this is really, was at the time rather scandalous, but mom and dad did a correspondence study of Henry Drummond. And Drummond was kind of the edgy person that began to really look at like evolution and nature as a part of a spiritual study. It is possible that Ernest's mother, Anna, was a transcendentalist, and we don't know that for sure, but that would make a lot of sense as to where they got their spiritual grounding. Because what Anna and William did for these 9 boys was orient them to Scripture. They read the Bible as a family every evening, but mother and father of these 9 boys did not believe in the devil, nor did they allow the boys to believe in a place called hell where you would be punished after your death if you did things wrong. So they raised these children to go to Sunday school, but to be able to filter what they learned and have a broader view, which is so cool. This is, I think, helps me understand a great deal why Ernest himself was so open-minded. Of all the children, Ernest was considered the most curious. And it was probably a great joy for him to have so many siblings where he could pick their brains. And mother encouraged their education, and they all learned to read at a very young age. They read every book in the library in Lincoln, Maine. And so on special occasions, they would hitch the wagon and go to the next nearest big town where they had a larger library, and the boys could get fresher, newer books and take in a study of broader titles. But what I want to speak to you about today is when Ernest Holmes discovered Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson had a huge impact on Ernest Holmes and his understanding and application of the spiritual principles that he began as a young man to develop and enhance and sort of interpret in his own way. And so what we know is that Ernest was somewhere between 18 and 20 years old. And he went to visit, the family no longer had the farm, they lived in town now, and Ernest went to visit his older brother who was married. So William, the oldest brother, William, was married to an interesting woman named Rose. Rose, we know, was Native American, and she was different. They said she was just not like anybody else anybody knew. She was well educated, interested in all kinds of things, and very edgy in what she read. And it was a treat to go visit Rose and William, because they always had a fabulous table covered with books that Ernest had not been exposed to yet. And so it was Rose who brought in Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays, and it was sitting on a table one day when Ernest went to visit, and he picked up the book and he began to read it. And they say that he did not put that book down until late into the evening, that Rose and William actually went to bed and said, blow the lamp out before you leave, turn the light out, and that Ernest actually came back the next morning and finished reading so that he had read every essay. Now, even Emerson was considered a bit scandalous at that time. Ernest's mother, who we know was open-minded, told Ernest, be careful, when he started getting excited about the writings of Emerson. But here's what happened. Ernest Holmes was so impacted by what he read, especially the essay Self-Reliance, that was his favorite, that it changed his life. He himself said that reading Emerson was like drinking water. So he had this great thirst for expanding his spiritual understanding. And he said that Emerson was the person that helped him kind of let go of some standard theological understandings and move into more broad metaphysical, spiritual interpretations of life and our experiences in life. And the reason he liked that essay, Self-Reliance, so much was that it gave him a profound connection to everything he already felt inside of him and he was trying to express. And he loved bantering with people and talking about, what do you think about this idea, and debating, and he loved all of that. But he said that when he read Self-Reliance, that something changed within him and he believed he had a healing. He believed that he healed a chronic throat condition and that he had been holding in things that he wanted to say. And more than that, he believed that he had, when he would be debating with very smart people who had really strong opinions, that he was feeling conflict. And that by reading the words of Emerson, he somehow understood in a very deep way that each one of us has our own opinion about some very strong topics. And he knew now that there was a way he could engage with people with different opinions without criticizing or putting them down. And his chronic throat condition was healed. He believed he had a physical healing simply in his understanding, in the way our minds work, in the way we use our thoughts. And it was the beginning of him putting together his own philosophy or methodology of spiritual healing and how thoughts are things and how we can use our minds and our thoughts to change our lives. That, my friends, is the premise of which this whole teaching is born from. And I think these are very significant words for us to ponder at these times, at such times as these that we are living in right now. I want to share with you, I pulled out, a long time ago, I wrote a workshop on Ernest Holmes, and last night when I was done with the talk, I was going to bed, I was trying to go to sleep, and I remembered that I had all these precious notes I took from his autobiography. So it was published as a biography because it was his work that then his brother Fenwick finished after he passed. But listen to these words that actually are Ernest Holmes' own expression about what it was like for him to embody the work of Emerson. He said, after a while, I was reading the Bible, and I read this passage that said, was speaking about Jesus, speaking of spirit, affirming that men must worship the Father in spirit and in truth. We would say humankind must worship. We must worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And he said that as I pondered over that, in the light of my new understanding, all of this new information now that is now making everything he already believed and studied, and it's putting it all into place, he said, I realized that did this not suggest the possibility that there is something in the universe that presses on us, seeking to express itself through us? This is a vague and yet an exciting idea, and there was something in me already that could enlarge and expand. I felt it swelling until I almost burst. I began a more thorough study, and I got a lot of help from it, and I often found confirmation of my new ideas. And I followed this practice through my whole life. He did indeed. He went on to create some great foundation for us to follow. He went on. His first book was written in 1918, so this would have been maybe 15 years after he first read Emerson that he wrote Creative Mind, Later that year, he published Creative Mind and Success. Those two books remain powerfully valuable books for all people who are interested in metaphysics in any way. So I then, after I thought about that and got so excited about it, I remembered that my favorite Emerson essay, actually I thought of this in writing the talk this morning, my favorite essay is Circles. And the reason I've always found that to be my favorite Emerson essay is because of this way he talks about the movement of life. And that for me, it makes it easy for me to understand the eternality of spiritual principle and even this great experience that we have in our own individualized living. And as I look at that essay, Circles, and see that life always circles back on itself, I see that great thing that those of you who listen to me often have heard me say before, and that is that as we observe nature, we can learn about life. That theme comes from Emerson. That's how we teach it in the first or second week of the foundation class. So Emerson says that as we observe nature, listen to this, we can see this rapid flow of goodness. We can see this rapid flow of goodness everywhere present in nature, that no matter what she bumps up against, that she recovers and she moves on, that there's this adaptability that is given us as a profound example, and it is no different in our lives. We are living in times where we have been called to be more adaptable than perhaps we're comfortable considering. And yet I see that the very experience of life in this year 2020 is inviting us to have a willingness to be open, to expand in our understanding of life, to be clear about what it is that we believe, but to be adaptable. And isn't the virus a perfect example of that? Everything we know about the virus has changed. You know, in February and March, we were getting all this information, and now all of that information has to be updated because we know a lot more about it, and we still don't know everything. And so there's a reason we have to pay attention, and we are following protocol, and we are doing things as we get more information. It is the nature of life to do so. This is no different. So let me read to you a quotation of Emerson's from the essay Circles. He says, "Only by preferring truth to your last apprehension of truth can you stand." I know, you need to think about it a minute. Only by preferring truth that is right here in front of me today, only by preferring this compared to my last level of understanding or apprehending truth, I can only stand as I continue to evolve in my own understanding. He goes on to say this, and this will clarify it beautifully. Each new step we take in thought reconciles 20 seemingly discordant facts. Right? Her little chuckle in here. Discordant opinions are reconciled by being seen to be two extremes of one principle. Oh, I can totally hear Reverend Cheryl getting excited because I'm about to talk about the law of polarity. That's right. I can hear her. Can you hear her? Yeah. So discordant opinions are reconciled when we consider that there are always two extremes to every principle. So if we're going to look at this idea of love, and there is no question that we all have some call toward expressing love or having an experience of love. Sometimes we get confused and we think that it's about getting love, but there's this law of circulation that means that we have to give it and we have to receive it. But the thing is, we have, as individualized, unique people, different from one another, we have different ideas of how to receive it. And when we study New Thought, we begin to see that over and over again it is written that it's the law of correspondence, that you can only have as much as you can receive. And so when you look at the law of polarities, there are people that don't understand they can receive more than just a little, and then there are people at the other extreme that realize they can open themselves to receive more and a lot. And then the other polarity is that we have different ideas about how we have opportunity to experience it, right? So there are principles that are ever active in this process. And the patterns, as we witness them all around us, bring us back to recognizing it's about growth, it's about movement, it's about expansion, and beautifully put when we think of it as ascending forever and ever in this upward spiral manner that the great thinkers have written about. One of the best spiritual tools that speaks to this spiral process of expansion and contraction and the movement of life, even as we breathe in the same way. One of the best spiritual tools is the labyrinth. And the labyrinth sort of resurged in popularity as we rediscovered it through Dr. Lord Artris, 20 or more years ago. And now most of us are familiar with a walking labyrinth. Many of us have walked the sacred path of the labyrinth. And what we know is that it is a unicursal path. That means one way in and one way out. It is not a maze. It is not something that confuses us, though you can get lost. You can cross a line on your way in or your way out, and you think you're going out and you end up back in the center again, or vice versa. And it's created, a walking labyrinth is created as a walking meditation, and they are priceless. I had one in my backyard before we moved over here closer to church, and I miss it a great deal. I prayed every morning in my walking labyrinth. But you can also play with the design of a labyrinth. I create them on tile. I always make one for our silent auction here at church. I take beautiful polished, naturally beach polished stones and put them in the design of a labyrinth on a tile that you can keep on your tabletop or put on your lap, and you can follow the path with your eyes closed if you so desire. And it can take you to the center, and then you can follow the path out again. And there are all kinds of important spiritual lessons we learn in this. I have a full day workshop that I do on the sacred labyrinth. But we're talking about sacred geometry here. We're talking about the universal patterns that are based on that idea of concentric circles, or the spiral that is always moving and living and breathing. The spiral is the most common pattern in the universe. And we can witness it in the heavens. And we can see it in the center of a sunflower. If you look at a living sunflower, you will see the pattern, the spiral pattern in the way that the seeds grow in the center of the flower. We can see the beautiful ripple of the spiral effect in shells that we find at the beach, or even in a snail shell. And it's intriguing that there are certain animals, the ram for instance, whose horn grows in that same spiral way. But here's the part that really touches me so tenderly. Even the uncurling of the human fetus in the womb comes from that spiral symbol. And so there is this magnificent unfolding of life in the invisible and sometimes visible sacred patterns that are before us. In mathematics, they call it the golden mean, or it is a principle of organic growth. And so let me just say briefly that the theory of the golden mean goes like this. Now you're going to see how this fits with the whole message this morning. The intelligence that guides all growth does so by allowing patterns to repeat. the intelligence that guides all growth, does so by allowing patterns to repeat. And so each stage of growth is related to the previous stage of growth as well as the next stage of growth. Now, if we take a look at our human life, we begin to see that each stage of growth is related to something that happened prior to what's happening right now that has given us more information, so we are slightly better equipped to deal with that, but we are being also equipped for that which comes in the next phase, forever and ever. And so when I think of it like that, I think of that biblical statement, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And now the golden mean becomes the golden rule. Like we can see the principles in the spiritual relationship we have to all of life. So we can count the rings in a, if you look at a slice of wood from a tree, you can count the rings and know the age. I had desert tortoises back in California that we hatched and raised and hatched more, and there was a lot. We brought a lot of turtles into the population. But the tortoise does the same thing. You can count the age of the tortoise by counting the rings in their in the patterns in their shells. You can look at the thumbprint. We can look at the prints of the divine artwork in our own hands, and we can throw a pebble into a puddle or a lake, and we can see the ripples, the concentric circles that ripple out in this very organic way that reminds us again and again of this forever motion of life. So let's just sum up by saying this idea of sacred geometry, that is, by the way, ancient, is that ability to recognize patterns. And so we're playing in that realm every time we recognize a sacred pattern in nature. We can use it in our own lives, the patterns of our own lives. And we always have the power to change our life. We go back to remembering that a single thought changes the entire body chemistry of our special individual being. So sometimes it helps to rest and to ponder these bigger truths and become aware of what we're seeing, and to ask ourselves, am I seeing things from a broader, more elevated view today than I did yesterday? Because as we begin to do that, it moves us a step closer to having an experience of wholeness, of oneness, of connection, not only with, really we're speaking about our entire lives and connection with everyone on the planet, this great web of life of which we are a part, but the connection of events in our own personal experiences and our own personal growth. So we are living in changing times. There's no doubt about that. They're calling it now, some of the spiritual leaders are using the term, these are liminal times. And the reason that's a good word is because liminal is more than just change. Oh, baby, we are living in changing times, and nobody questions that anymore. But when we look at it as a liminal type of a change, we then are drawn to a deeper understanding that these are transformative times that we are living in. And so we are invited to be transformed by renewing our minds, right? We are invited to open our minds and to create a space where we can allow Spirit itself to enter and help us to stretch what it is that we have believed in the way that we are living our lives. The word liminal literally means threshold. So I really want us to focus on that. We are crossing some kind of threshold right now. And I want to say that when we begin to put it into the context of everything I said last week, when we looked at changes in civilization, and the week before that, which was the beginning of last week's conversation, and now when we add this in a way of looking at energetic patterns, at sacred geometry, this natural divine pattern of life that is God-given in that infinite sort of way, we can realize that there's nothing wrong with not having it all figured out right now. That it's okay for us to be uncertain. And in fact, in the teachings of the East, and especially in Buddhism, there's an emphasis on that space of not knowing. They call it the bardo, the middle way, and that there's something precious happening here. So when you are seeking for truth, when you are enhancing your own education in the same way Ernest Holmes constantly, continually, until he left the planet, he was always looking for more information. He said, whatever you got, bring it. I'm interested. And that's what we mean by staying open at the top. Remember that there is a lot of doom and gloom that is spoken by a lot of people that are just doing their part to try and wake us all up so we'll make better choices, whether it's environmental or political or in terms of civil rights. There is a whole lot of waking up going on right now, but we're in that process of doing that. So we want to stay open, take time to be open every day, leave space for God to enter so that when God enters, we can get really stretched. Because even the doom and gloomers don't have it all figured out. I'm counting on the younger people, actually. But I stand firmly in my conviction that all is well, and every manner of thing is well, because something magnificent is attempting to emerge on this planet right now through us, and we want to stay open to that. So I will end this morning with a fabulous quote from Ernest Holmes. I have a heavy Holmes day today, don't I? Because this is such a beautiful reminder to stay open at the top. He says, we have to keep our minds open at the top for an influx of new wisdom. Good advice. We have to set up a sign that says, stop, look, and listen. Does this that I believe measure up to truth? Do that every day. Do that every time you are confronted with a naysayer or someone who is completely convinced in a different way. Every time you feel that tickle in your throat like Holmes did, take a breath and just be open to truth for you. And it's not our job to change other, we don't get to decide what anybody else's truth is. We do our work from our perspective. So just be willing to look for the bigger, to be open to the newer, and you never know, something magnificent may just come right through you as a vessel for the voice of God at any given moment. Whew. All right, so I have said what I came here to say this morning, and it's always empowering to anchor words of truth, to find the principle in what's been spoken this morning. So I'm just going to invite you, right where you are, to take a nice deep cleansing breath. And as you gently close your eyes or take a soft focus on something in the room where you're seated, begin to ponder the pieces of the message that struck you the most today. There's a gem here for you. I know that for certain. So what was your gem? What little piece of truth are you willing to investigate with a little more urgency? Or how have you been uplifted or inspired this day so that you can move freely and beautifully through the rest of it? And so as I anchor myself in the fullness of the awareness of the presence of God right here, right in the powerful words and the vibration of those words, I know that this prayerful intention ignites something within each and every individual at the sound of my voice. Even those who are passing by this church in their cars can feel something tingling within them, and it is truth. It is love. It is the activity of life itself. And so as we anchor ourselves in that openness, in that newfound awareness of the way that truth works in our lives, we stand strong in principle. We feel that quickening within us, and we know it to be the love of God. And even as I feel the movement of God's love within me, I remember again, it is a powerful force in this universe. Some say it's the most powerful force in the universe. And so knowing that there are all of these gorgeous patterns, that there is this cyclic nature, a circle of life that is ongoing forever and always, I rest comfortably in knowing that in each cycle we rise a little bit more. We are called to ascend to a higher perspective, to a broader perspective, to a place where we can look again at our very own shenanigans, our movements, our thoughts and beliefs. We can laugh with that great humor that is the laugh of the divine. We can feel that joy. We can be uplifted by it, and we can allow that laughter as the breath of life breathing us to expand everything we have thought and believed and stood in as truth from before. And that we now rise again to an even higher perspective, and we begin to see the way that all of life is connected on this planet, that one thing is never separate from another. And I say thank you, God, as I rest in the beauty of seeing that everything is already given, that the grace of God is always flowing. And in fact, in this moment, as we open ourselves to be vessels to receive, this love of God is rushing. This healing energy, this intelligence of the divine is activated within us. It is stirred to shine like a golden light illumined from us. It is the divine love of God healing us inside as well as shining from above us. We open ourselves to recognize it, to embrace it, to let it envelop us in such a way that there is indeed healing, that the intelligence in our human bodies knows how to remedy anything that ails us, and that there is only life. Even as we age and discard of this physical body, we rise again to a greater and greater ascension of the experience of freedom, of love, of power, of truth in all ways. And I love that way that we know that nature does not let us stay in any one place for too long. We move because it is necessary for the advancement of our soul. Thank you, God, for clarifying this to us this day. How wonderful it is to know again our thoughts matter, that right where we are loved, guided, protected, and carried forward. I do say thank you, God, and I release the words of this prayer into the law, knowing it is already done. And together we say, and so it is. And so it is. Woo! Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, thank goodness for the movement of Reverend Clyde, who reminded me what I'm supposed to do next. I am always honored to be the first person to drop my offering in the plate. I'm grateful to you for finding your way to continue to tithe, to give of your heart, your love, your gifts, your everything we need to keep this place going. You cannot believe how many people have been in this building working hard, giving of service, growing us, changing us, readying us. And of course, your tithe, your financial tithe, keeps us able to do all of this. So grateful. I want to tell you that we have always been a part of the local food bank, and I am told the food banks are receiving donations again. And so Yasmina, who has carried on the tradition from Priscilla Fenner to make sure we get regular donations to the food bank, she wanted me to announce to you that we are collecting your canned goods, non-breakable good food donations for the food bank. So bring them by. Between Cheryl and I, we are here Monday through Friday, and often even on the weekends we're here. And so you can drop off your donations, especially in the morning. If you want to just be sure somebody's here, call ahead and let Cheryl know you're coming. I have some exciting news. I had a great Zoom. I did a little mini retreat with the practitioners yesterday. I am ready to teach. And so I have this great original class that I wrote weeks ago, and I have just procrastinated the commitment. I'm making the commitment today. You will find the dates and the rest of the information in the newsletter or on the website this coming week. My class that I'm so excited, What the Hell? And it turns out that HELL is an acronym for head-on, effective, liminal living. So we are going to face all the conditions in our lives and use spiritual principle, apply the science of mind principles. It'll be a 4-week class. We're going to hold it on Tuesday evenings beginning October 12th. The Reverend Clyde will be co-hosting and helping me with the Zoom details. So we're starting October the 12th, and we're going to do it at 3 p.m. because he travels, and so if he's on the East Coast, he can be free by 3 o'clock. It'll be 3 to 5, and everybody's welcome. Spread the word, because you don't have to live around here. It will be a Zoom class, and I'll have the rest of the details posted by the next time I see you, and I'll continue to promote that, because we'd love to have a big crowd do that. So 4 weeks, Tuesdays, 3 to 5. I love you. I love you. I love you. I am really getting itchy for us to be back in this sanctuary, and I am believing with all my heart and all my soul and all my being that will not be long. Probably not October, but I really think we're getting there. I love you. Have a blessed week.